Check out our streaming schedule for this week. We stream every single day on this channel, talking about all things sports history. And now with college basketball season really getting in the swing of things, we are doing a lot of college basketball streams, commentating the action as we get one step closer to March Madness. So join me every night as we call the best of college basketball. And now, on with our feature presentation. If you ask fans of the Cincinnati Bengals who the biggest what-if is in franchise history from the perspective of whether or not they could stay healthy, most people would say that the top player was Greg Cook. Cook was a first-round pick in 1969 and was immediately one of the best quarterbacks in the American Football League, leading the league in passer rating and finishing fourth in touchdown passes. Unfortunately, Cook got injured and didn't play again until 1973. Having said that, Bill Walsh, the legendary Hall of Fame coach who was on the Bengals staff in 1969, called Cook the greatest quarterback he'd ever seen, which is insanely high praise, seeing as Walsh coached a man that many consider to be the greatest quarterback in NFL history in Joe Montana. Who knows how good Greg Cook could have been if he could have stayed healthy, and just how much history changes. But he is, quite possibly, the biggest what-if from an injury perspective in not just Bengals history, but in pro football history. But if you ask Bengal fans who the second biggest what-if is in franchise history from an injury perspective, without a doubt, it's this man right here, their former first-round pick from the 1995 NFL Draft out of Penn State, running back Ki-Jana Carter. Carter was one of the best running backs in the nation coming out of college, and in 1994, with the Penn State Nittany Lions, he was a unanimous All-American and finished second in the Heisman voting after leading the Big Ten and the NCAA with 7.8 yards per carry, and having a whopping 1,539 yards with 23 rushing touchdowns. The Bengals love Carter so much that they traded up with the Carolina Panthers to acquire the first overall pick in that draft, seeing as they needed to bolster their ground game badly. As in 1994, the Bengals finished second to last in rushing touchdowns, averaged under 4 yards per carry, and their leading rusher, Derek Fenner, had just 468 rushing yards despite playing every game, meaning that their leading rusher was 33rd in the league in a 28-team league. There was no reason whatsoever why Ki-Jana Carter couldn't have bolstered Cincinnati's offense and took the league by storm, as there is a reason that the running back went first overall, and to this day, is the last running back to ever be taken first overall. And then, he immediately got injured. The problem with Carter wasn't that he couldn't play from a talent perspective, because he had the talent. The problem was that he was made of glass in the NFL. And just 3 carries into his career in the preseason, Carter was ruled out for the season with a torn knee ligament, destroying his left ACL. This came after straining his Achilles tendon earlier in camp. And as Carter said on this when he heard the news, that's like the worst thing that can happen to somebody's leg. This set the tone for Carter's career, as not only was he never the same, but even when he came back, the man could never stay healthy at all. There's a chance that Carter could have been a super talented running back who took the league by storm, not made the Bengals the Bungles anymore, and been someone we talked about all these years later as one of the most fun players in football during the late 1990s. Alas, that was not the case. Having said that, how his career ended with Cincinnati after many disappointing seasons in so many ways was absolutely insane. You probably know the story of the fact that Carter was a bust, if we want to give him that label, just because he couldn't stay healthy. But you probably don't know how exactly his career ended with Cincinnati, because to say that the Bengals did him dirty would be putting it lightly, and to say that he deserved better would be an understatement. Because what if I said that he found out that his time was up, not from the Bengals themselves, but from ESPN, the worldwide leader in sports? Because in breaking news to this man right here, the Bengals forgot to actually, deliver the news to him. And this is the story behind how the Bengals did their number 1 pick dirty, and how ESPN, technically speaking, ended a man's career. Before I talk about it, make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel. We post every single day about the weird and the wacky history of the NFL. So if you want to learn more about the great and crazy history of this sport, I'd really appreciate your support, as every bit of support helps as we inch closer and closer to 70,000 subscribers. Thanks in advance for liking and subscribing. And with that in mind, let's talk about the Bengals really bungling this one up. Before I talk about what exactly the Bengals and ESPN did, we need some context to understand how Ki-Jana Carter's career was going before the incident in question. Like I said before, the Bengals did not get better under Ki-Jana Carter's watch, as not only did the Bengals continue to stink and be near the bottom of the AFC Central with losing record after losing record, but Carter barely played. His career with the Bengals ended with just 747 rushing yards on 227 carries. Considering the fact that many running backs in the late 90s were averaging over 300 carries per season, Carter touching it way less than that over his entire Bengal career showed how banged up he was. Along with the strained Achilles tendon and the torn ACL in 1995, he had a torn rotator cuff in 1997 and a torn wrist in 1998 that made him miss the entire season after just 2 carries in week 1. Maybe things would be different in 1999 though. Maybe, for once, Carter could find a way to stay healthy and not get injured right away and miss a good chunk of the season. Unfortunately, that was not the case. Carter was back in time for the start of 1999, but he did next to nothing, as not only was he a complete shell of himself, but he got very few touches. In week 1, against the newly named Tennessee Titans, he had just 6 carries for 15 yards and a loss. He had no carries in week 2, which was a 27-point loss to the San Diego Chargers. And in week 3, a 27-3 loss to the Carolina Panthers, Carter dislocated his kneecap with 7:27 left in the first quarter. Just like 1998, Carter's season was over in September before it was even beginning. There was some debate about whether or not he'd be able to come back in time for the end of the season. But after the Bengals consulted the appropriate medical professionals and debated how to use the roster spot, keeping in mind that back then, unlike today, due to the rules, once you were on injured reserve, that was it, and your season was basically done as there was no real coming back, the Bengals decided to put Ki-Jana Carter on injured reserve. Carter would have been back with plenty of time left in the season if he wasn't on IR, but they decided to make the move to put him on IR. Just like in 1995 and 1998, Carter was going to spend the year on injured reserve, meaning that in his 5 seasons with the Bengals, he spent more seasons on IR than he did on the active roster past the month of September. Absolutely horrible injury luck, and like I said earlier in the video, a classic case of what could have been. Said head coach Bruce Coslett, "It's freaky. It's unfortunate. I don't have an adjective to describe it. It's indescribable to me because I was counting on him, and now I don't have him. Just a bummer all the way around." But we've got no issues so far. Carter gets hurt once again, and the Bengals put him on IR. There's just one small problem with all of this. There's just one teeny tiny problem with placing Ki-Jana Carter on IR. That's right, the Bengals forgot to actually tell Ki-Jana Carter that he was going on IR. You see, Ki-Jana Carter was watching ESPN at his house when he saw his name pop up on the ESPN bottom line ticker, with the bottom line ticker saying that Ki-Jana Carter was on IR. And obviously, ESPN has every right to report that news. It is sports related, and seeing as the ticker is used for news updates, and any player, let alone a former first-round pick and a Heisman finalist, going on injured reserve for an injury sustained during a game is going to make news. So a player seeing their name on the bottom line ticker for ESPN isn't necessarily noteworthy by itself. But it is noteworthy, and it is newsworthy, when the player in question had no idea that they were placed on injured reserve. Because the Bengals forgot to tell him that, "Oh yeah, by the way, your season is done." He found out the news from television. Said Carter on how everything went down, "I was very disappointed that they did this without giving me a chance to talk them out of it. If it was a season-ending injury, I could understand it. They say I'll be out for 8 weeks. I say 6. Then we have 7 or 8 games left. I mean, that's half a season. So Carter going on injured reserve was a letdown, and then it was a double letdown when he found out that his season was done and he wasn't going to be returning via a television notice. As Carter said, "I came home and was watching TV and saw my name at the bottom on the screen saying that I'm out for the year." That's the big thing that really disappointed me, that I had to find out from TV. Everyone in this whole world knew I was out besides me. In other words, this was the worst surprise ever. Surprise, you might never play another game with the Cincinnati Bengals ever again, and you're out for the year. As you can probably imagine, this was a massive miscommunication on the part of the Bengals, who somewhere along the chain of command completely forgot to tell this man right here that he was no longer going to play for them in 1999. Team President Mike Brown said, "Sometimes these things happen. You have to move on things in a certain amount of time. And when you do, the word gets out, you can't catch up to the guy." But somehow, I don't buy that excuse. I don't buy that one bit, especially seeing as this isn't a problem with other teams in football. I'd figure that the first person you tell about something is, the person that's being impacted by this. It's not as if this was a random person that had to find out the news via ESPN or a reporter that had to find this out on television. This was the actual person who was being left in the dark. And Carter, much like the rest of America, didn't seem to buy the excuse whatsoever. As he said, "The least they could have done for me is called. I don't want to talk bad, but if anything, I deserve that much respect. Nobody told me what the decision was. The biggest thing was that there was a communication problem. Everybody should have been kept on the same page." And yeah, I can't exactly fault Carter for wanting to know about his job status and finding it wrong that he had to find out at home via a third party. If your girlfriend breaks up with you because your mother calls you and just drops the news in passing, and that's how you find out, yeah, that would suck. If you find out that you've been laid off because the company is doing massive layoffs and you find out the next day in the newspaper, that would suck. Bruce Coslett tried to rectify the situation as best as he could by offering an apology, which is more than Mike Brown did when he tried to excuse the behavior. As Coslett said, "I think the world of Ki-Jana Carter. I've said nothing but positives about him because I meant it. He's just star-crossed. We didn't, in any way, shape, or form, do it on purpose. It's unfortunate he felt bad, but I felt bad too. Not really much of an apology. I'm sorry you felt that way. Yeah, that's really going to get it done." By this point, the damage was done. Ki-Jana Carter's 1999 season had come to an end, and it was about as unceremonious as possible. And as it turns out, this would be the end of Ki-Jana Carter's career with the Cincinnati Bengals, as he would never play again with the team that drafted him. His career came to an end thanks to a message on an ESPN ticker while he was at home and completely oblivious to the situation. Carter dislocated his kneecap once more in 2000 while working out, and he was cut shortly after, although he would sign on in the 2000s to play sporadically with Washington and New Orleans. But Carter's final line with the Bengals was just 747 yards and 16 touchdowns, most of which came from the goal line. That's barely productive for any NFL player, let alone a first-round pick, let alone the number one pick in the draft, who was hyped up by some to be the next Barry Sanders. Ki-Jana Carter is one of the greatest what could have been stories in NFL history, and if he stayed healthy, he could have been amazing. Alas, that was not the case. But regardless of how he is viewed today, whether he deserves the bus label, and whether he is the one that got away if you're a Bengals fan, you can't deny that he deserved better. Plain and simple, Ki-Jana Carter deserved better. No one should have to find out that their career is over by watching ESPN and seeing their name unsuspectingly pop up on the bottom line ticker, especially when you're hoping you can come back and redeem yourself and give it one last go. And like I said before, you can't blame ESPN for this. They got the news, and they reported on it. Not their fault that the Bengals neglected to tell the player involved about his own status. Because in 1999, let's just say that the Bengals were known as the Bungles for a reason. Because they really bungled this one up. Be sure to like and subscribe if you have not done so already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And check out my other channels, JG8 for the history of college football, JG7 for the history of baseball, and JG9 News, where we talk about all things happening in the NFL. Join me every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, where we'll play live NFL trivia for cash prizes. And make sure to join me live, as we're on stream just about every single day. And thanks to all our Patreon members and our YouTube members for helping out the channel. See how you become a member and show your support financially in the description down below.